Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Terry Eichel, and I work with the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network. We are a faith-based environmental group here in Connecticut. And I'm really glad you have joined us today for a presentation on battery storage. This is a fourth in a series of four presentations that IREJN has hosted in the past few months. We did one on financing large energy efficiency and clean energy projects with the Connecticut Green Bank in June. The second was on the urgency and opportunity, taking advantage of the federal clean energy tax credits. That was in August. Our third webinar was on energy efficiency for houses of worship, and that was in September. And you can find recordings of our past webinars on our website under resources. At IREGen, we are committed to helping religious communities and people of faith tackle environmental challenges. For example, we help them implement energy efficiency and clean energy measures. We also help faith communities plant vegetable gardens, pollinator gardens, and fruit trees. And we also help with advocacy efforts in support of strong environmental policy. I really want to thank our presenters from the Connecticut Green Bank for joining us today. Peter Ludwig is the Senior Manager of Market Engagement on the Financing Programs team. In this role, he works with stakeholders and building owners to access clean energy through Green Bank programs. And Ed Kranich is the Associate Director of the Incentive Programs for Energy Storage. So we will have them do their presentation, and then we will do a Q&A. So if you have questions, I believe you can put them in the chat or the Q&A. All right, I will hand it over to Peter.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry and Rosalind for having us. And I'm going to start, and Ed, if you would go to the next slide. I'm going to start just by kicking off a little bit about the Connecticut Green Bank, and then I'm going to pass it over to Ed, who is going to share a lot of insight and information about the Energy Storage Solutions Program. And I'll say there are a few slides in a row about the Green Bank. I'm going to try to touch on them at kind of the 10,000-foot level to give you the main idea, and the slides will be shared. So if you have questions about the story that those slides tell, we're happy to connect more about it. So it's not going to be I'm not going to go over every single fact on every slide. Ed, would you go to the next slide, please? So just very quickly wanted to touch on who Connecticut Green Bank is. We're a green bank, which means that we're not exactly a bank in the traditional sense. We're essentially a public agency with flexibility, and the way we work is that we use small amounts of public money, electric ratepayer money, things like that, to attract private investment and really help Connecticut's green economy grow. And our mission is to confront climate change. We have that strong, we try to embody that strong connection into making sure that investment goes into our communities. And our vision is a planet protected by the love of humanity. So our director, Brian, often says, you can't have environmentalism without humanitarianism. So we're trying to move forward with that vision. Next slide, please. So the main idea of this slide is just that this is sort of the way we approach the work, where we're trying to use limited amount of public resources to scale private capital investment. I think our leverage is one for every public dollar, we leverage almost $7 in private investment. We think that's a sustainable model. We are interested in really trying to make sure that the market for green investing grows, and we're really want to have a strong focus on our vulnerable communities, making sure that savings and resilience and capital are available to everyone. Next slide, please. So this is one of the slides where I'm not going to go through it in fine-tooth comb type of approach, but just this is sort of a more detailed version of our model. And what you'll see is on top a kind of good graphic display of how we're mixing public and private capital. We're not always making loans. So, in this case, on the line number 2, you'll see there's a couple different ways we might work in partnership with others to enable transactions, to remove risk, things like that. So this kind of gives you a sense of what a green bank really does. And then on the bottom, you can see that the bottom right, you can see we kind of divide our work into homes, contractors, buildings, and communities. And the way we think about the benefits on the bottom left, where we're thinking about economic development, the sort of environmental ecosystem benefits, obviously energy, reducing energy burden, creating clean energy, environmental protection, and equity. Next slide, please. This just gives you a sense of really how much capital we've deployed, over 3 billion in a little over about 14 years. And you can also look at that kind of leverage ratio for 463 million. We've attracted about 2.6 billion in private investment. And so we're proud of that. We also think it's important for the programs to continue and serve everyone. Next slide. And then there are a couple slides that just sort of show how we think about the work and what are some of the drivers for us to kind of keep going. Job creation on the economic development side, tax revenues. We are at the Green Bank very data driven, so we have lots of data, we have lots of numbers. We think a lot about energy burden and deploying renewable energy. Let's go to the next slide. Another way to slice this is to look at greenhouse gas emissions avoided. And so we have some ways of thinking about, it's hard to sort of conceptualize what's a ton or a million ton of CO2, but it could be almost 200 million trees growing for 10 years, and public health benefits that not only, reduce human suffering, but also create actual economic value in our economy. And then, of course, we think a lot about kind of where our capital is deployed. We have a 40% goal of serving vulnerable communities. There's a few different kind of definitions that you might use, but we're always trying to ensure that we're working with all of our communities across the state. Let's go to the next slide. And then this is a good kind of segue to Ed's portion of the talk. And this is kind of how we organize our work. We think about home solutions, building solutions, investments, community, contractor, and then we have the ESS program, which Ed's going to get into more detail about, which can kind of touch on buildings, it can touch on homes, it even touches on contractors. So with that said, Ed, I'm going to pass it to you, and I'm going to let you take over. Tell us all about energy storage.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Can everyone see and hear me okay? See my screen okay? All right, I see a hand up, so I think that's a yes. All right. So let me jump to the next slide here. So I'm Ed Kranich. I'm an associate director of incentive programs with the Connecticut Green Bank, managing the Energy Storage Solutions program. So prior to working on the ESS program, which I started working on in 2021, I worked in the residential solar program with the Green Bank for about 9 years. So I've been with the Green Bank for quite a while, and my experience is mostly in residential solar, and now in the last 5 years, the commercial and residential energy storage world. And I think one of the interesting things about houses of worship and faith-based organizations is that it's not like a typical commercial property, of course, and they can range quite a bit in size, from being kind of analogous to a small residential size to being a much larger commercial size. So I think we have a poll question coming up, but we just kind of want to get a background of sort of who's here, what folks' needs are, and kind of how batteries can serve you all. So and I think Peter, I might be mistaken. Is this where we launch our poll question, or is it in the next one? And apologies for not remembering here.
I think it's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, actually, you know what, Terry, if we could launch the poll question before we get going, I think that would be helpful. Here it is. All right. So before we get started, we have this poll question up here. Tell us about your building and what you do. So how many days a week is your building in use? 1 to 2 days, 2 to 4 days, or 4 to 7 days a week? And then what activities are you doing with your building? So worship, administrative offices, residential, which could be, housing, like kind of like how a YMCA has housing in some cases, or for clergy who live there, community center, athletics, or serving as a shelter, either in uh, critical times or around the clock. So you can have multiple choices for that last question. So we'll give a minute for folks to answer this one. All right. And how are we looking on responses, Terry?
We got about now we got 86 that have participated. 86%, sorry, 86%, 86.
Okay.
Uh, so
All right.
last call for anyone who wants to answer these questions. 90%. All right. Just a few more people out there.
90%, pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, all right, folks, I'm going to end the poll and then share the results. Does that
All
show
right. So
up? Can you see it?
4 to 7 days a week is the most common. So that's good to see. Um, Worship, administrative, residential. Okay. So, so from what it looks like we have a lot of multi-purpose buildings that don't just serve as houses of worship, but serve other purposes, which makes it great for being a community space where you're needed. Which kind of brings in the need for something like energy storage, and all sorts of energy upgrades. So thank you for responding to that poll. So first slide here, I just want to talk about what is battery energy storage. So I have a couple of graphics on the screen here on the left side, and I put a little cartoon construction worker to give you some scale for what the actual like physical size of these things could be. So at the top left, we have a typical large commercial system. This is what you'll see installed at a Walmart, or you might see several of them installed at, a large warehouse facility or something like that, even, school or library. And this is considered kind of a larger commercial size. It's about the size of a shipping container, and it's 2 megawatts, typically 4 megawatt hours. A lot of folks will install more than one. And then on the bottom here, on the bottom left, you have typical residential size system. This is the most common piece of equipment. It's a Franklin brand, Franklin whole home battery. They're about the size of like a filing cabinet or a small refrigerator. So depending on the needs of your building, you might be installing something closer to that large shipping container size, or maybe something about half that size, or just a couple of these smaller residential systems. So battery energy storage systems, um, they provide backup during power outages. I think that's what most folks are interested in when they want to explore batteries for their property. They can help you save on electricity costs depending on the type of utility rates that you're on. So for commercial customers, you get charged a monthly demand charge, and you can use a battery depending on how peaky that demand charge is. You can use a battery to help smooth it out, which brings down your average monthly cost. They come in a variety of sizes, as seen here in this graphic, and they can really fit any need. And the important and exciting part about batteries is that they can charge directly from solar panels, or they can charge from the grid. when they charge from solar panels, it's kind of like having your own fuel source for your own backup generator. And when they charge from the grid, it's kind of like having a limited fuel tank for your generator, so to speak. And I see a couple of questions have come in, so I just wanted to just make sure we're addressing them as we go. So will storage pay for itself, and most interested in storing and using solar power? Okay, so those I will address those as we go on. So let me jump to the next slide here. So why energy storage for Connecticut? Why did we create an energy storage incentive program to promote installing batteries on the grid? The first reason on the right, kind of the obvious one when people think about battery backup is to provide backup power to the individual who installs the battery. So whether it's a home, a business, uh, you know, church, community center, what have you. Be resilient while addressing climate change. So, as time goes on, we see more and more of these severe storms. Thankfully, knock on wood, we haven't had any major storm events in the last year or two. When this program was being developed, it was around the time that we had, these major kind of 100-year storms seemingly every year for a few years. And it became a real concern that folks were losing power and they were staying out of power for a week at a time. So providing backup power is very important to the safety and security of folks in our state. The other reason is that when you don't have a storm, you don't have an outage, and you're not using the battery, you can use the battery to smooth out peak demand on the grid. And what that does in the energy storage program is it kind of collects all of these batteries as like one big distributed power plant, and it can discharge all the energy stored in those batteries at one time. And that helps to bring down the peak demand for everyone in the state, which actually can bring down the energy costs for all ratepayers. So it's kind of a way to avoid the utility having to purchase very expensive and often very dirty, high emitting uh, energy or energy from high emission power plants at the peak times in the summer when everyone has their AC running and the grid demand is very high. So when it kind of smooths out that peak demand, it can actually bring down energy costs for everyone in Connecticut, whether you have the battery installed or not. So, and just a little bit of background on this program. So it was created in 2022, or it was launched in 2022. It's the Energy Storage Solutions Program is managed by the Connecticut Green Bank, Eversource, and UI jointly. We're all the co-program administrators, and it's overseen by PURA, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. So we go through annual review processes where they look at our progress to date, how much money we've spent, how many benefits we've received and deployed for folks in Connecticut. So it's a very kind of tightly regulated program that ensures that there's a minimum threshold benefit for all ratepayers in the state. So our progress to date, on the left side, I have buildings, which is what we call basically anything that's non-residential. As you can see, it's schools, apartment buildings, houses of worship, and on the right we have homes. So for buildings so far, we've approved 87 projects since January 2022 for 169 megawatts, 409 megawatt hours of capacity, which is a lot. However, only 5 of those projects have completed so far. So they get approved quickly, and they're very large projects in development, but they take a while to install because a lot of them are very large in size, and they take a long time to go through the interconnection process. So for all of these projects to date, we are looking at, over the lifetime, once they get installed, about $290 million in upfront or in total investment in energy storage in Connecticut, and 50 million of that being upfront incentives from the Green Bank and from the Energy Storage Solutions Program. On the home side, it's kind of the opposite. Things are a little bit slower, but they do get installed a lot faster. We've got over 1,100 projects approved for 13 megawatts, $30 million in total investment. and 383 of those projects to date are categorized as either underserved or low income, which, as Peter mentioned in one of the first slides, the Connecticut Green Bank has a strong internal goal of serving underserved and low income customers, particularly in residential spaces. And the goal that there's actually a legislative goal for this program that 40% of the benefits served those underserved or low income communities. So right now it's at about, I think it's at 33, 34%. So we're approaching that 40% target, getting there. So the program is going pretty well so far. And about 551 of those projects are completed. So why would you want to install an energy storage system at your building? So the three reasons are reduce your monthly peak demand. And there's an asterisk there. I'll get to that in the next slide. Keep your community safe during an outage, and kind of be that place of refuge. And you can reduce peak demand in Connecticut, which is a good environmental target. So for folks who are interested in serving Connecticut and making an impact, this is one way to do it. So reducing your monthly peak demand. If your building is large enough and you have a large enough electric bill, really, if you're using a kind of a high amount of electricity in the month, you can use a battery to smooth out your peak demand. This is more applicable to something like a retail space or machine shop, factory, something like that that uses a lot of high power equipment, a lot of HVAC. But if you're a large community center, you have something like a gym, athletic centers, things like that. Those can have very peaky demand during those, high usage times. And you can use a battery to charge it up when electricity rates are low. And if you have time of day rates, you can charge it up at a lower rate, and then you can use it when electricity is more expensive. So you can kind of use that to sort of avoid paying higher electricity rates. Uh, Next one is keep your community safe during an outage. So you can provide shelter. You can open as a shelter. If you have backup power, you can, if you don't already serve as a shelter, you can do that. You can be a heating or cooling center during the winter and summer. And you can be there for people in your community to keep them safe during an outage if people don't have backup power at their homes. And you can do this by backing up your entire building, or you can just choose to keep the critical lighting and safety equipment running, just kind of the bare minimum of what you need. So this is something that when you're talking to your contractor about your needs, this is where this comes in. So you can say, based on my budget, based on, my room for solar panels to charge the batteries, based on the room in our basement to install these batteries, here's what we want to do. Here's what we want to power during an outage. And finally, you can help reduce peak demand in Connecticut. So you can reduce your carbon emissions, which is great for everyone who breathes air in Connecticut. You can pair them with or without solar panels. So you can actually reduce your carbon emissions without even having solar panels, because by charging that battery when there's more cleaner baseload power on the grid, then you're avoiding using electricity when there's high emitting power plants running on the grid during peak times. And of course, you can earn incentives by doing that to help make Connecticut's grid cheaper and cleaner. So now into the incentive part of things. So the Energy Storage Solutions Program, I will warn you, it is a little bit complicated. So bear with me and don't feel bad if you don't take it all in one go. We're always available to talk to potential customers, building owners, developers, anyone to, kind of do a little bit of a slower walkthrough and kind of talk about your needs for your own specific situation. So In the Energy Storage Solutions Program, customers can receive two types of incentives. One is an upfront incentive, so that's just total amount of money that comes off the top of what you owe for either your loan or cash payment to your contractor. Um, and in exchange for that, uh, your battery will be programmed to basically be on kind of a set it and forget it dispatch schedule. So what that means is that in June, July, and August, minus the weekends and the two holidays, Juneteenth and the 4th of July, your battery will automatically discharge up to 80% of the capacity that it has to serve your building's load, and then any excess will go off to the grid. So basically, you're just kind of on an automatic, let's reduce demand during this schedule. On top of that, if there's any days during the summer, typically, where the utility suspects that there will be a peak or predicts that there will be a grid peak at a different time outside of that window, they will instead call on people's batteries to do a more targeted dispatch. Instead of that 3 hour window, they'll condense it into maybe a 1 or 2 hour window, might be at a different time. And depending on how your battery performs during that time, meaning how much energy it puts out onto the grid, we'll do that 40 to 50 times in the summer. The customer will have their performance tallied up at the end of the season and earn an additional payment on top of that. And that is paid each season for 10 years. And that's done both in the summer and winter. And I did see another chat come in, so I just want to make sure we're addressing that. Is the upfront incentive still mandatory and active optional? It's actually the other way around. So anyone can enroll in the active part where it's, fully optional. You don't have to participate in the active events. And to earn the upfront incentive, you can do the passive dispatch to take the upfront incentive. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want the upfront incentive, then you can just do the active only. But if if you're enrolled in passive dispatch, you do have to participate in all of those pre-programmed events. Um, and yeah, you can opt out of active dispatch if you prefer. All right. So just to kind of summarize these here, so passive dispatch, let's try to boil it down. If you receive the upfront incentive, like most customers, your battery is pre-programmed for weekdays, June, July, and August. And basically, it just kind of helps ensure that your battery is targeting what is most likely going to be your peak usage during the season. And then active dispatch. Anytime that we predict or the utilities predict that things will be different than that, they'll send a notification. They'll inform the operator of the battery that there's going to be a different time for the next active dispatch event. And you can opt out if you so choose for that time. So what about outages? This is a very common question. If I'm participating in these dispatch events where I'm discharging my battery in the middle of July, what if there's a big thunderstorm? And the answer is that most battery systems have software that will prevent discharge if there's a major weather event coming. So Franklin, Enphase, Tesla, they all have this software in there. On top of that, we will cancel any and all events that are scheduled if there's something that triggers the utility's readiness protocol. So if you're signed up for alerts, anytime you get a text from Eversource or UI that says, we're predicting a big storm, make sure that you have your kind of outage checklist all ready. Those are the times where we will cancel the event for that day. So it is kind of a higher threshold for us to cancel events, but we will allow you to use the software that comes with your battery that will look at your local weather that will make the decision, as to whether it will reject any calls to discharge. Um, on top of that, we don't discharge in April, May, or October, and typically between November and March, it's really only about 2 to 3 events. So you're really only looking at June, July, and August for the bulk of the events that are called in the discharge days. So onto incentives and kind of how it all adds up. So our incentive levels, I just included we call them commercial and industrial. Really, this just means non-residential. So I think everyone on the call here would qualify as small, medium C&I, just based on the size of the buildings. Um, so these are the incentive rates that would apply to you. So based on the current rates right now, it's $182 per kilowatt hour of capacity in the battery, or 159.25 per kilowatt hour, depending on the size, depending on the customer's needs, and the size of the battery. We have a priority customer adder for any of these customers, where if you serve as a critical facility, meaning you are, in this case, I think if you operate as a shelter or place of refuge during outages, you would be considered a priority customer. So we have a 25% upfront incentive adder for that. If you're considered a small business, or if you're replacing a fossil fuel generator, we will approve an additional 25% on top of that incentive. On top of those incentives, the seasonal performance incentives, they do step down. There's summer and winter rates, and then they step down after 5 years. But in the next slide, I'll show how it actually all adds up. So here I have a kind of a smaller size system example. This is a 40 kilowatt inverter, 60 kilowatt hours of capacity batteries. So this is probably on sort of the larger side of residential, but for kind of a small commercial or small non-residential operation, this seems about normal. Um, Based on just using the averages from what we've seen in the program so far, average system costs for this type of a system before incentives, and just for the battery, not including solar panels or anything like that, is about $65,000. The upfront rebate that we would approve for such a system is about $13,650. Federal tax credit, 15,000, 10 years of performance incentives, 21,705 is an estimate based on, the performance of the battery and kind of making a few assumptions, but that's sort of on the conservative side of estimating that performance incentive. So the net cost for the full 10 years, not including like a discount rate or anything like that, but just the nominal amount, is about $14,000, for a battery that can back up, kind of a large house size, or, small commercial, for, a couple days of backup power, is, we think reasonably affordable. And that's before we get into financing. So I know Peter's on the line. He could talk a little bit about seat-based financing and some of the other financing mechanisms that the Green Bank has. But in the Energy Storage Solutions program, we're agnostic to that. So if you want to secure your own financing, if you want to use a lease or power purchase agreement with your contractor, you can do that. So typically, we say when customers have questions about this, you can come to us. You can certainly use Green Bank financing, but there's no requirement to do so in order to access these incentives. So next here is just another example of probably a slightly larger system, something that's kind of more for a community center. And that's 100 kilowatts, 320 kilowatt hours. Total cost installed before incentives is about $384,000. Upfront incentive climbs up to about 72,800. Federal tax credit, 10 years of performance incentives, comes down to sort of this net cost of backup power of about $94,000 over a 10-year period. Again, that may seem like a lot, but again, that's before you factor in any demand savings, which for a system this large can actually, help out for a customer that has uh, electricity use of this size. They're most likely going to be doing this for some demand savings as well. So we like to look at that as kind of your base, sort of worst case scenario cost of the system before any additional savings. So next on getting started. So if any of this has been interesting enough to you to kind of pique your interest that you want to look into this for your building, the process first, you can visit energystorageCT.com. You can find a contractor. We have our eligible contractors list on there, linked here and also available on the website. Once you find a contractor, the process will be that you'll work with them to design a system, an incentive package that works for you. So that's going to include financing as well. So it may be something that you want to take out a loan for, maybe something that you want to do in lease agreement, so that you can better uh, get the better value of those tax credits by having a third party entity owning the system. You'll design the system based on your needs for backup and for demand savings and really just the size of the system needed for your home, or I'm sorry, for your building. Um, at that point, the contractor will apply for permits, interconnection, and incentives. The Green Bank would approve the project, and then contractor will build the system. That takes anywhere from a year to 3 or 4 years, depending on the size. If you're looking at that large, shipping container size battery that's, 2 megawatts, you're looking at probably 4 years for installation. But for the smaller size systems, they're 100 kilowatts or less. That's kind of like a 1 to 2 year type of ins installation timeline. And then once the system is interconnected and operating, the customer can receive those ongoing performance incentives twice a year for the 10-year term. And depending on your financing and depending on the arrangement for payment with your contractor or system owner, you can actually sign over those incentives so that you can receive the value of them upfront, so that you can kind of sign over that 10-year stream to them. And I see Terry has jumped on here. I think I just want to make sure time check is
No, no,
okay.
time check's fine, actually. I just was,
Okay,
we have got good questions coming in the Q&A in the
sure.
chat, so I just wanted to help sift through them so we made sure we got through everything.
Yeah. So that actually brings me pretty much to the end of my content here. So, um, yeah, so we could probably jump on into the questions.
Awesome. So Andy had a question. Do the utilities top up the batteries if the National Weather Service forecasts a storm?
The utilities won't, but the software on your battery, typically when they go into what's called storm mode, is they will make sure that they're topped up and they will refuse any discharge signals. So if there's a threat of a storm coming and you have, say, a Franklin system, I think it's called Storm Guard or Storm Hedge. It will go into kind of like outage protection mode that they call. So the battery software will read the weather and make sure that it's charged up.
And Steve wanted to know, and this is, so he wanted to know, do you pay the standard supply rate to charge the battery?
Yeah, so if you have if you have a grid tied battery that does not charge from solar, it charges directly from the grid. Yes, you pay your standard rates to charge the battery, and that's why ideally you're going to be doing that at nighttime when demand charges are lower, and if you have time of day rates, your kilowatt hour energy rate is lower. So yeah, you do pay to fill it, and then when you use it on site for your, you know, during a discharge, it'll serve your building's load before anything goes off to the grid. But if you do have a standalone system, the way that the metering and billing works with the utilities right now is that if you do have excess that goes off to the grid and you don't have solar, you don't have any type of a net metering situation, you actually don't get compensated for what goes back off to the grid. So that is a consideration too. You kind of want to make sure that the battery is sized appropriately to what you need. And if not, you're going to want to have solar because then you will get compensated for what goes off to the grid.
And that's a good segue because I was wondering if you have net metering and like most people will sort of build up a credit and then they work through it and then they wind up with an electric bill in like February. Um,
Mhm.
how does the battery and the dispatching interact with? Does it sort of like supersede it?
So, if everything is behind the meter, so say you're like a residential type system, if everything is behind the meter, your um, netting meter or your tariff meter doesn't know the source of the energy that's going back through it, back off to the grid. So really, say if for some reason if we discharge at 9 p.m., your net meter will just think that your solar is is sending power to the grid at 9 p.m., which would be weird, but the battery's doing it. So it doesn't really care where the energy is coming from.
Okay,
So we call it just time shifting when
right.
you actually send it back.
So Peter Festa has a question, a specific question about his church. It says my church struggles with the affordability of a full-scale solar installation for the facility. So he's wondering, could you basically have a smaller solar installation and a battery connected just to the new heat pump that they've installed and nothing else?
Um, that's probably a better question for an electrician, I think,
Okay.
because you would, if you're talking about using the solar and battery for the heat pump, like say in an outage, that would have to be on its own. They call it a critical loads panel, where when the building or when the battery switches on, it's only going to serve one particular load in the building. So that would be something you'd want to talk to your contractor about.
And we have a couple questions about the longevity of the battery with the charging and the discharging. Like, what does that do to the
Hmm.
cycles?
Yeah, so in our program, on average, it's uh, about 80 cycles a year that we'll put on the battery. So over 10 years, that's 800, so under 1,000. Most batteries that we've seen when they have 10-year warranties, or we require that the battery have a 10-year warranty. Um, and they typically have a cycle warranty as well. And what we see in, the cycle warranty is like 5 to 10,000 cycles. I think Franklin is 8,000. So really, our cycling of the battery is pretty small in comparison to what they're actually warranted for. They are designed in a lot of markets like California and Hawaii to just be used every single day, and we only do it about 80 days out of the year.
Gotcha. Phil mentioned that nonprofits, churches, houses of worship, and whatnot do not pay a demand charge. They have the rate 40. How does
Okay.
this affect the payback?
So um, make it would make the economics of the project not as good as if you were on rate 30 or rate 35. So yeah, so that's why we had that asterisk on the demand charge part. So really, when you talk about payback for a battery, if you're on that rate that doesn't have a demand charge, you're probably going to be looking at it more like a residential customer would. And residential customers, their quote unquote payback, like their value is avoiding buying a generator, avoiding the hassle of buying fuel and kind of dealing with that. It's more of like um, it's less tangible of a benefit. So the businesses that do this, they look at it, dollars and cents. But if you're residential or like you said, rate 40, it's going to be more of like the value that you provide to your community.
Mm-hmm. Um, and let's see here. Steve also wanted to know, can EV batteries be used in the same way to provide backup power within this program?
So not in this program yet. We do actually have it on this year's annual review docket, where we are considering, or we have asked Pura to let us let in certain types of vehicle to grid systems. Right now, there's actually very few um, consumer, like I think they're like class one or something, like smaller, like light duty. That's what they call them, light duty vehicles that are actually capable of doing it. And there's actually no program in the country that I'm aware of that does what the energy storage solutions program does with vehicles. Typically, it's vehicle to X, or which means that the vehicle can serve your home load and it can't actually export all the way out to the grid. What we want in this program is for vehicles to go all the way out to the grid. So we have a proposal for this year of allowing medium and heavy duties, so like school buses and trash trucks, to join the program for next year. And we're hoping that that could kind of serve as a pilot for allowing light duty vehicles like a Ford Lightning or something that can do vehicle to grid in the future. So, as a long answer to say no, no, not right now, but it's something that we're very interested in.
And have you been, so in terms of hooking your vehicle, even just for your home load, how would that work? Would you have a bi-directional charger? What would you have?
So for vehicle to home, uh, yeah, you would have to have a charger that can serve that can go both ways. And in that case, that would be considered like an off-grid situation. So you wouldn't need to do interconnection for it because it's like having a backup generator that,
Right.
has a transfer switch that turns off your connection to the grid. It gets a lot more complicated when you have the ability to backfeed onto the grid.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Let's see here. What else do we have? Egbert was wondering, where does Connecticut stand on time of use rates?
That is probably on a 10-year timeline. So um, the trying to think of the name for it. It's known as the successor docket with Pura, and it's basically about kind of the future of solar distributed generation and all these distributed assets on the grid in the future in Connecticut. But basically, in UI territory, they do have the metering in place to have a lot more customers on time of use, which if we had more customers on time of use rates, then batteries would begin to make more financial sense because you can use them to, buy low and use when it's expensive otherwise. Um, in Eversource territory, they just have so many more customers that it's going to take a lot longer to get everyone on this advanced metering infrastructure that would allow for, widespread time of use rates. And then just, uh, you know, I don't know if like politically it would make sense to switch customers over to have everyone do time of use because it's more complicated and it might be difficult, but it's probably kind of on a longer runway to actually get to that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So not anytime soon, I would say.
Bob wanted to know, if you do not have a real need for backup power, would battery installation be considered an investment?
Um, Actually hold that for just one. I just want to add to the previous thing. So there is time of use rates for Eversource and UI customers. It's just not widely available yet. So you could do it now. It's just not the norm for everyone else. So I just want to clarify that. Um, but so the next question, if you don't have a need for backup, could it be more of a financial investment? Is that the question?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yes, but it's kind of we'll jump back to this slide here, the asterisk. If you don't have a demand charge or particularly a high demand charge, it probably wouldn't make financial sense.
Okay. And Tom wanted to know, can you use the solar panels to charge the battery during a power outage?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll keep
I
that
was
one
waiting for
short.
you to
Yes,
expand on that.
yes,
Nope.
you
The
can.
answer is yes.
Yeah, so you'll go into off-grid mode and the system will charge from solar panels and then you can use the battery. So depending on time of year and how big your solar panel system is, you can consider it off grid.
Mm-hmm. Um, Let me see if there are any other questions. This has been great, Ed. Thank you so much. It's been super
Yeah.
helpful.
Hope it was
Um,
helpful.
so Third Act wanted to know, can we help our neighbors in a small community? But I don't actually understand the the question as it relates to this. So Third Act, if you want to pop in a little bit more detail.
I can say if you're talking about outreach and helping folks access this, particularly those who can access the low income incentive adders or underserved incentive adders, those are the folks that we want to benefit the most in this program. So if you're talking about community outreach, we can connect you with Jason for that.
That's awesome. And actually, you raise a good point. I know that the federal rebates for, I believe, residential are ending at the end of this year, but the federal rebates for commercial battery storage are still in effect, as well as the different adders, which were like 10% for low, moderate income communities, 10% for prevailing wage,
Hmm.
10% for domestic content, and I think 10% for an energy community, which is defined as a community that either was involved in coal mining or had
Hmm.
a coal plant that was shut down. So in Connecticut, that's sort of the Bridgeport Fairfield
Yep.
area. Um, so, but those adders still exist as well. So for a house of worship, if you're able to access obviously the 30% and then one or more of the adders, it can really help with the cost. However, I think the 30% is going away for residential, right?
It is for residential solar. It specifically it does
Oh,
it
but
does
not for
not.
residential battery storage?
Yeah, so not for residential batteries.
Oh, great.
Although most people do, I think like 99% of our projects that do batteries also have solar. Um, but I will say that some of the requirements of receiving that tax credit include that the equipment doesn't come from a quote foreign entity of concern, which a lot of batteries all come from not only the same place but the same like factory. And there are some manufacturers that are specifically called out as, they're on like I think it's like a Department of Defense like blacklist or something basically.
Okay.
So it's really complicated and no one has a good answer. Even I spoke with Tesla earlier this week about their fiat eligibility, and they don't know yet because rules are made without very little, without very much explanation. So
And
I think
I know for solar, the FIAC rules, um, in terms, there are three different categories. In my August presentation, guys, I went through this in a decent amount of detail. Um, but I know that they don't really kick in until January 1st, 2026, which is why,
mhm.
if you, in terms of what Ed's talking about, the actual materials requirements, so people are really working to get their projects started in 2025 so that they could just be sort of grandfathered in. The term is
Hmm.
called safe harbor. So is that also the same here if you start your battery storage project and make a deposit towards it? Can you be in 2025? Can you be safe harbored into the FIAC, or not having to meet those materials, even if your battery storage isn't installed until 2026 or later?
I'm afraid to answer that from a
Okay.
commercial standpoint, so
It's very complicated, I know.
I will defer to a tax expert on that. But on residential, there is no safe harbor. It's just you have to be interconnected and online by X date,
Okay.
which is, 12/31,
Very
25.
soon, too.
So yeah, so really, I mean, at this point, I mean, it's almost November, so we're telling people if you're just starting the process and you want to get a tax credit, don't expect it. A lot of solar installers have stopped taking on new residential customers or at least stopped guaranteeing them installation by
Sure.
the end of the year.
Third act, so to provide a little more detail, said, what I meant for neighborhoods is that if the green bank would pay for a shared battery system.
Okay, so I think that's kind of referring to like a microgrid type of situation, like a neighborhood where a battery system could serve a particular circuit or neighborhood. If that is what you meant, feel free to clarify again in the chat. But so that's not uh really part of this type of a program. If you're talking, microgrid type situation, that's probably better suited to our capital solutions team. That's pretty uncommon though, I would say. So, one battery that serves multiple homes is not really yeah, it's probably not feasible.
Mm-hmm.
But something like an apartment building or um, multifamily housing is certainly in our wheelhouse.
All right, this has been really great. I feel like we've pretty much come to the end of our questions. Um, I hope this has been helpful. Please, you can reach out to IREJN and the Connecticut Green Bank with more questions. As you know, for IREJN, if we don't know the answer, we will always try to help you find someone who does. The Connecticut Green Bank is a wealth of resources and information. They're super helpful and super responsive. So I also highly encourage you to reach out to them. And as I mentioned earlier, our website does have a resources page and it's got all of our webinars, and you can just spend some time. Been really lucky to have some great presentations on not just energy efficiency, but switching to reusables and uh, things on natural playing fields versus artificial turf, and how to put your garden to bed for the winter and plant native. So it's a really wide range of topics. So I hope that you can take advantage of it. Anything else, Ed or Peter? Anything you want to throw in there?
No,
I
just thank you for
think
having us.
that's it. Yeah, thank you.
So I will. This has been recorded. I will put it up on our. We have a YouTube channel, and I will put it up on our website, and I will email it out along with contact information, in case you want to be able to reach out. And please watch our website for upcoming events and in-person events and webinars, both of them. All right.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
all.
everybody.